Hello, welcome to our very first show of Ink Your Story. This is Sabir Amin, a user-centered designer at Ink Studios. Stories play a huge role in the world of design. We are always collecting them, writing them, and telling them. So we thought about inking a few stories that really drives our team. These are told by people who inspire us with who they are and all the amazing things that they do. We would like to start this journey with a person who, in many ways, helped us find this design studio. He's changing the meaning of design in Bangladesh, and while he has done so much both globally and locally, he has always held on to one design principle: being a good human being first. And that has made all the difference. So I present to you our very first storyteller, Tazin Shadid.
Hi, this is Tazin. So, for the last few years, Sabir and Inked have been a great source of inspiration for me when it comes to design in Bangladesh. And I'm very excited to have my story inked and looking forward to speaking to you all over Inked. Thank you.
Alrighty, so let's get started. So this is basically my story for all of you, since all of you are designers and kind of part of a group that thinks about design. So I was thinking about what do we talk about. So I asked Abid what would be relevant for you guys, and he said I can talk about anything. So that's the hardest challenge you can have when someone says you can talk about anything, because then you don't know what you're going to talk about. But this is something that I always think about in terms of design and how design is related to life. So it's my point of view of a designer's guide to life. Actually, the whole title is "Change the World or Go Home: A Designer's Guide to Life," and then you will see why topic of change the world or go home is kind of relevant. Sabir actually ended up creating a poster for this for us that had this exact line of change the world or go home. So basically, I'll start with it's called Maslow's law. It's also called the law of the hammer, that says like if you have a tool, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So for me, everything in life looks like a design problem. So anything that is, even this session itself is a design problem, because I have to think about what would be relevant for you guys, what would be a good usage of your time, how can I tell a story to you guys, and I apply, as I said, I think everything as a design problem. That could be career, relationships, management, a new solution, a product, a service. Everything to me is a design problem, and life itself is a design problem, and I'm still trying to design it. So that's why it's about life, and it's about designing life, and I'll share a bit about that. This is a very century-old Italian proverb that Voltaire, a French philosopher, later on kind of translated that as "perfect is the enemy of good." So in life, there cannot be a perfect design. That's what I believe in. That could be, as I said, and I design everything from relationships to companies, to strategies, to a presentation, to a product. And then I always think that just go for a good design rather than a perfect design. And I'll start with my playlist, and I'll talk about how that is also related to life. This is my Spotify playlist, and again, there is no perfect playlist design. You can just, everyone has their own way of sorting their playlist. Here, I'm just saying, my playlist. I've kind of circled the folders I have, and those are actually different stages of my life. The reason I even take that into my playlist, because as I said, it's contextual. What I listen to, my context in my when I was 18 is very different than when I'm 40, as I've gone through the experiences. So you see there are three stages here. The life 1.0, as I said, it's my early years. Life 2.0, I call it Vincero. It's a Italian word that means I will win. And the third one is reincarnation. And those are the three folders where all my playlists are kind of sorted. So with that, like let's kind of move on to the first one, my life 1.0, which is basically the early years. I would say from 0 to 21 or so. So basically, again, like the change the world or go home concept was not there. That stage was more like see the world and then come back home. So that was the mode I was in, and then that's the early years. And in design, and then I'll talk a little bit about each of the stages. In design, anything depends on the elements you get. You don't always have all the design elements in your disposal to design the perfect solution. And life is similarly like that. Everyone comes up with, they are born with a lottery. The person who is born in a slum versus the person who is born in Gulshan, their lives are going to be significantly different because of the tools they get. For me, luckily, my parents, I was born in Chittagong. My parents were there. And they sent me when I finished my kindergarten to Dhaka to live with my grandparents because they wanted me to go to this school specifically, to St. Joseph's. If I don't get admission, I was supposed to go back to Chittagong. So I prepared for that. They take admission from grade 3, and then I get into that. And the reason I wanted to talk a little bit about that is because it kind of set the stage for so many different things. That's where I got a lot of my early learning in terms of my journey. Even the building itself, if you can see, like it's very like non-Bangladeshi design. It was designed by a foreign architect. A lot of people actually credit the design to Louis Kahn, who designed the National Parliament building. But when I dug up, I realized it's someone who worked with him, who was here at that time. He probably had advice, but I don't know who the actual architect is. The building is full of glass. There is almost like, very little brick, and then it is designed with the students in mind. Like even things like when it's raining and the classes are not being held, there is a place for all the students to stand. So there is this 1.5-story building, and then there's the second floor. So it's a very interesting design. And it is also a place where I kind of got to practice and learn a lot of my leadership skills that I still use. I was part of the Cub Scouts from 3rd grade, and then later on became the Boy Scout leader for the school. We would go into camping in very remote areas for 7 days. I actually don't know how my grandfather allowed it, because at that time there was no phone. So for 9 days, we will be gone with no communication with anyone in the world. So it will be really, really remote places. So that's something like that really helped me. And then later on, like our school had very structured clubs and organizations. I got to be the president for the cultural club. And we actually ended up organizing some of the biggest events in Dhaka at that time, in Bangladesh actually. It was not the Facebook age. There was no events or anything. There was no activity going on in Dhaka. Whereas like we used to organize big competitions like inter-school debate, inter-school quiz. All of our teams would act as like different platform. So the cultural club would organize the biggest quiz competition in the whole country. So we'd have around, I think the year I was the president, we had about 12 schools. All the top schools would come in. Participants would be begging for tickets because we could only allow 10 or 20 tickets per school. And there will be hundreds of people coming in. There was also a side effect, again, like the informal part of it is that was the only dating spot, like the school would not mix. So boys and girls could actually come in. A lot of couples that I know met during events that were hosted in our schools. So which is probably a good thing because I mean, a lot of them are still together. So that was kind of like, the first element in terms of, as I said, like, getting the right design elements early, and then that kind of sets the stage to design rest of the work. For the next stage, I think I finished high school and I moved to the US. And this, I want to talk a little bit about how as a designer, you have the tools, but sometimes you have to pivot to come up with better designs. So when I moved to the US, I mostly was studying computer science. I finished my undergrad in computer science. I was doing pretty good at it. But I'm always open to new ideas. And what interested me was human psychology. I got very interested after my first psychology course. In Bangladesh, whenever we say psychology, we say pagoler doctor. So that was not an area I have explored, but the first psychology class I took that really changed my view of the world and of life. So I got interested in that. And then after my undergrad, the last semester of my undergrad, I was a bit frustrated that, yes, I'm a very people person, but I'm communicating with a machine all the time. We got a project to help the senior citizen center of the city where our school was, and they got some computer as donation. This is the first time they were using computers. So when we were talking with them, it was so interesting because the first thing they asked when we were telling them how to use a computer, they were holding the mouse upside down because it's a mouse, so they thought that's a tail, so it was supposed to be the other way around. And also they asked questions as when we say double click on an item, they would say how long should I wait after the first click? So that was my very first exposure to what later became human-computer interaction, or HCI. And then now it's mostly known as human-centered design. But at that time, we didn't know about this field. But it was very intriguing, how they were thinking things that as technology students we took very easily was so different for them. And that kind of led me into thinking about, okay, how can we think more about this area? And then one of my professors told me, hey, have you heard of this field called HCI? There was very few programs in US that offered HCI. So again, another interesting aspect was that my master's program on HCI was designed completely by me. It was sponsored by the English department, where I got a fellowship to teach English to first year and second year students. And then my degree was in technical communication. They had some usability engineering courses, and then I combined some courses from psychology department, some from computer science. But good thing is I got to experiment a lot, which is again as I say, when you pivot, it's very important that you are always open to come up with these things and new ideas. A lot of people told me I was crazy to leave computer science after my undergrad, but I think that was one of the best decisions of my career, because I along the way also got a great mentor. My department chair, Dr. Brenda Sims, who pretty much forced me to get into my job at Microsoft. So that was kind of my first version 1.0. The Life 2.0 was different from the second one. That's where I kind of started focusing on this whole mantra of change the world. And one of the things that happened is, as I say, design inspirations can come at very unexpected moments. And for me, this Life 2.0 started from a very unexpected moment. I had a huge heartbreak at that time. However, the heartbreak was not the design inspiration. The design inspiration was I was very depressed for a long period of time, and then at that time it was, I think, 2006, maybe January or in early 2006. The Winter Olympics was happening in Italy. I think this was touring 2006. That was the games, and then I was watching this one particular event. Was the figure skating final, where there was this Japanese skater who pretty much everyone had given up hope on her. The only reason she competed because the primary candidate from Japan team was, I think, 6 months short of being 16. So they sent her, who was pretty much about to retire. And her story was so amazing that just right, I think they usually practice with the same song for years. But right before that, she changed her song to this, one of my favorite classical tracks called Nisan Dorma. And there was a line called Vincero, which means I will win. And she made a flawless performance and ended up winning the gold. And actually, the first ever gold Japan got in figure skating, and the only medal they got that Olympics. And that's why, like, I write Vincero as the my 2.0, and I have that written on my whiteboard. I think for the next like 7 or 8 years, I did not erase that one word. It was always written there on my board, because then I kind of picked up where I was kind of giving up hope on a lot of things. I turned around, ended up getting into Microsoft, and that was a dream job itself. Like it was beyond my expectation. Like being surrounded by really smart people, colleagues who have actually written books that I've read in my grad school. So that was pretty amazing. But within that, I'm not going to go much into the work at Microsoft. A lot of amazing design projects. Maybe we can talk about those another time. But what I did is, like, I tried to take as much of like meaningful life experiences, because that always influences your design choice. So I was always focused on that at Microsoft. Like, I realized there's so many avenues that you can do other things. In October, for example, they run what they call the gift campaign, which is basically where they donate money to charity. The year I left Microsoft, they raised $120 million in 1 month. So I think, like, I did the math, that was like around $4,000 per minute or something like that. And it comes to a very different company. They very much focus on encouraging people to not just donate, to actually get involved actively. There are a lot of very famous nonprofits that actually was born out of Microsoft. Room to Read is a big one. Actually, John Wood later on wrote a book about it, leading Microsoft to change the world, which became a bestseller. And I got introduced to these people, and then with that, like, I always wanted to do something around healthcare. I was already involved in a bunch of activities in Bangladesh, but through that, I started this healthcare program called Healthcare for Underprivileged program. And later on in 2011, that kind of grew from just a healthcare program to other programs beyond health, education, and skills training. And that's also the time I met Sabir in US, in Seattle, actually, when he was going for his degree in HCD. And this is actually his design, one of his very first design for Spree, where, like, he, at that time, everything was sketched by him. We didn't have any pictures. And for a long time, we only had sketches in all our materials. So this is one of those designs. So as I said, like, the life experience I tried to get in, not just like through Spriya, but also, like, I got very involved with their diversity program. I ended up becoming the chair for the Asian Employee Resource Group, which is the largest diversity organization in Microsoft. It has about 18,000 members and about 17 different employee networks from different regions or ethnicities that are represented. And that gave me, again, like, when we talk about design, one of the key things, I mean, you already know all of that, is empathy. And there's nothing better to learn and practice empathy when you have all these people from all these countries working together on that same mission. So that was a very good opportunity for me. Kind of fast forward that to Life 3.0, which is, I say, the reincarnation, when I started practicing this whole, like, the concept of change the world or go home, which is basically pretty much I again, like went through a huge transformation. And the reason I kind of separate this 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, they're very, very different. The person I was in one stage is very different from the person I am on the other stage. So when 3.0 is mostly my phase of design for yourself. Again, like, at that point, like before that, I was working on all these like change projects. I was going to work for people in Bangladesh. I was going to work for all this diverse population, all of that. And then again, like, it went through another transformation that was kind of mostly through my personal life things that were going on at that time. And again, like every time it's related to a music or a movie. And I'm very much, music is a huge part of me. And then this transformation was also related to the soundtrack of this movie, Secret Life of Walter Mitty. I don't know how many of you have seen it. If not, I highly recommend the movie and plus the soundtrack also. And it was a story of someone who finds himself over the period of one task or one project at work. And for me, it was like that. I started thinking about like, how am I going to be happy? And then what do I want to do? And from that moment, from that stage, things kind of changed significantly. I've been thinking about moving to Bangladesh for a long time because Priya was growing, but it's always difficult because you have all these responsibilities to your family and others. And then I kind of, you start thinking about yourself, when you're designing for yourself, it's very different from designing from someone else. Then you have a lot more say into how you're going to design it. So with that, I decided to quit Microsoft after almost about 10 years. And it was a pretty big decision on my part personally, because a new design problem requires you to letting go of the old. And that was a very comfortable life. I was doing Spriya and Microsoft and all of this. It was going pretty smooth, but at the same time, I had this urge to go back home. A lot of people who move out of corporate job, go into nonprofit, are people who are unhappy. But I was doing fascinating stuff. In fact, when I decided to leave, I was doing the most, I think, inspiring and fascinating and kind of most like impactful projects at that time. And if we have time later on or some other day, I can show you some of the projects I was working on at that time. One of my big research areas, that work is still ongoing, and they still have not released the product where search would be out of those 10 blue links, and it would be like a magazine. You search about something and you get a custom-made magazine for you. And so that was one of the projects I was working on. I was working on healthcare. I was working on how do you manage tasks, personal, professional, and all of that. So it was a very interesting time, but I still kind of decided to give up all of that and kind of focus on Bangladesh. And when I came back here, I also pretty much I always try to focus on one plan. And that is again goes a bit contrary to regular design ideas, because we always think of different versions. We always think of plan B. But I was watching this talk by Arnold Schwarzenegger, not related to this, but I just saw it a few days ago and kind of clicked that. He also mentioned that don't spend your resources on plan B. Every resource you're putting on plan B, you're actually taking resources from plan A. So I always give my 110% on plan A. And since I moved to Bangladesh, my plan was to establish Priya and make that an innovation hub. And Sabbir joined at that time as Priya. One of our other colleague, Dr. Zahid, who has been working with us since 2007, he joined full time. So we had a great team. And I decided, you know what, I need to focus on that. And Sabbir kind of mentioned it earlier before the presentation. And this is an information very few people know, only probably maybe less than 10 people know. I ended up giving surrendering my green card so that I don't have an option to go back. And it was, again, a pretty big decision because I was 3 months away from becoming a citizen. in US, but that's all right. I think like it was a very good decision. If it was not for that, I probably would have gone back because there are times it gets very frustrating. It is not easy to come back after 17 years. It is extremely difficult. And I kind of consider myself like they call them coconut, so brown outside and white inside. I seem like a very good Bangladeshi who can like mix anywhere. But a lot of my who I am, my beliefs, my personality traits, my values were built in US, and that gives me a lot of trouble in Bangladesh. Even simple things like driving, I still cannot drive in Bangladesh. It's like Sabir probably drives me anywhere like an at night. He comes and sometimes picks me up and then we go for it. But I don't feel comfortable driving here. So that's kind of like, when the 3.0 started happening. And again, like, connected to uh, the focusing on your design is also this concept of like when you're trying to do a bold design, you have to take big risks. When you are doing like, generic designs, it's easier. But when you are doing something like crazy, I would say you have to take big risks. And for me, that was something that was very, very important to take that risk. And this poster is actually very, very inspirational for me. I don't know if you know the story how this athlete, like he started instead of standing when the national anthem would play, he would kneel down to protest the kind of systematic, I would say, issues regarding African American people in the U.S. He lost almost his career. He lost many sponsorship, lost a lot of fans, but he kept doing it. And if you get a chance, you can see the Nike commercial, which is very, very inspiring. And finally, like, kind of focusing on like going back to like change the world through good design. That's the opportunity I got in Bangladesh. Obviously, like, Spriha, both Spriha US, Spriha Bangladesh. Again, the Spriha Bangladesh logo gives me a lot of inspiration. Another amazing creation by Sabir, because it kind of encapsulates like what we wanted to do as an organization. So many things that Sabir is involved with. The Amar Lab logo is also designed by him. In fact, like Amar Lab idea was his initially, and then we kind of tweaked on that later on. And I think Redwan took a service last week. Hopefully, we can provide many more services, and it's doing pretty well. So we did like Spriha. I mean, a lot of you know already about that. Amar Lab was a health tech startup. Druto Sheva is something we just launched where people can connect to doctors and eventually they'll be able to connect to lawyers and accountants just through Messenger, no app required. It's using Messenger rooms, and the online payment service, everything integrated. I was a co-founder of Spider Digital, a fintech company where we did Bangladesh's first social payment platform for Facebook merchants. Uh, I was a co-founder and started Neo Farmers, an organic and natural food product line. Recently, we started Mindly, which is healthcare, mental health care focused platform. And then finally, Cholo Shobai is Bangladesh's first crowdfunding platform that we launched right when the COVID situation started. We are helping not just NGOs, we are helping others like individuals, even corporates like Uber has a campaign running over there that's raising money for their drivers. So again, like in all these things, I think as I said, like, everything to me is a design problem. A lot of people complain about things in Bangladesh, but I think like because of that, we have so many options to create and solve problems and come up with innovative ideas. It could be food innovation, it could be a high-end innovation, but there are so many things we can do. So with that, I'm almost to the end of my presentation and Life 4.0. However, there was no Life 4.0 in my Spotify playlist. because it is still, it's in the process of designing. I am not done with the designing. In fact, like my sketchbook is full of sketches of my 4.0. I'll show the first, the final one that I have so far. So last year I turned 40, and it kind of, and I'm also a dad right now. So I have a 2.5-year-old who keeps me really busy and wants a lot of time from me. And it kind of made me realize that my whole concept of change the world or go home, a lot of people actually told me, like, what's wrong with going home? And I was like, I'm just like, no, we have to, like, either you do big things or just, like, leave everything and just, like, let others do the work. But I went through this kind of change, and again, still going through this change. It was my New Year's resolution that I'm going to give more time to family. I'm going to give more time to myself. I need to figure out my mental health, my physical health, my spiritual health. I used to run half marathons in the US. I used to bike like 80 miles a week, run 30 miles a week. And from there, I just, like, I'm sitting at, work all the time. I ended up gaining, I think, like 40 pounds almost in last 4 years. So it is crazy. So I need to focus on myself and family and friends. So I started thinking about how do I do that? So I came up with this model right now, these 4 quadrants. In the one axis is money, because yes, financial are important, and the other axis is time. So the first quadrant is where there's no money involved, but I want to give a lot of time in that region, 40% of my time into, like, this personal time. And then the next quadrant is my career, and I want to give another 40% there. That actually is my financial support. And also I want to give a lot of time in there. And the third quadrant is my investments. This is basically for the future, where I don't want to give a lot of time, but they should give me some financial support later on. And the fourth quadrant is kind of like my giving back to the community, which is, like, again, like, there's no money involved here. It's basically pure volunteering. So when I started putting all my things in there, and I can show you the first version was very, very messy, but now it's going somewhere. So this is my first version of it, and it looks very different by the end of the current time. So again, like, it's still a work in progress. As I say, like, design takes time. Design is a never-ending process. The reason I have these 4 stages of life, and every time I'm designing it, but there is no design that will sustain forever. It's very contextual, as I say. It's also very, like, cultural, and also it depends on time. So you cannot have one design that will go for eternity. And that's where I am right now, designing the 4.0. And something interesting before I finish, like, just a couple of points I wanted to add. Sometimes your design inspirations are right in front of you. And as designers, we sometimes overlook this design inspiration. This is my kind of my pin board from Microsoft. So this is way before Pinterest was there, and you would actually have real things and pin it to the board. That's how the name Pinterest comes. And if you look at the bottom left one, the Go Home, that was written by one of my colleagues in probably my first or second year. It was 2006 or 2007, so almost 14 years ago. I was running some user studies locally, and I was doing some remote user studies with people in Germany. So I was staying at office all the time for, I think, almost 3 days. I didn't go home. And when I finally did, I saw, like, I came back, and one of my coworkers has written "Go home" and then taped it in front of my office door. And I kept it as a reminder that I should take a break from work. But now that I'm designing that, actually my 4th life stage of going home, I realized that sign was always there. I just didn't connect the two. going home didn't mean taking a break from work. Going home meant what am I supposed to do in life, and that's something that was very interesting to me. That it was always there. I just didn't get the clue. So with that, like I just want to say that yeah, don't panic. I am not panicking because I'm at this stage at a very I'm almost like I'm gonna be 41. But the good thing, if you kind of get the uh, kind of hint of this slide, is from the movie or the book Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy. They say like 42 is the answer to life, universe, and everything. And I'm still not 42, so I have a year and a half to figure out my life 4.0, going back home or going home. And also like the don't panic from the book is also very relevant because I think yeah, like the world is going through an amazing change right now, but I am not panicking. I'm again like I feel like I'm a designer that's trying to solve problems, and this whole current pandemic is also a design problem for not just for us. It's a for entire humanity should go through a change. It's their time to redesign their life, their course of work. And also, I feel like maybe I have a year and a half to find the perfect song that I can finally have a 4.0 playlist in my Spotify. So with that, thank you everyone. I kind of took way longer than I thought I would, but hope it's interesting to you guys, and let's open up for Q&A.